You've all heard of Shingeki no Kyojin, or Attack on Titan. If you haven't, you must be living under the world's heaviest rock.
Who are you people?
It's a monumental franchise which took the world by storm upon its debut back in 2013, and solidified itself as one of the key progenitors to anime acclaiming mainstream success. It's an anime of anime strive to be, with massive cult appeal in both the Eastern and Western world, taking over the lives of people culturally, both young and old, with its captivating grip and unrepenting charm. If you ask other people what they think of Attack on Titan, they'll more than likely respond with seemingly endless praise and positivity for the show, deeming it as good, great, or even one of the best shows they've ever laid witness to, commenting on the soundtrack, the visual aspects, or, well, everything. On the other hand, if you ask me what I thought of it, I'd only have one thing to say to you. I think Attack on Titan is utter garbage. Multiple viewings of the show have helped me solidify my opinion in the ground for this show being one of the most overrated, abhorrent, and intolerable shows within the medium, with it committing some awful atrocities within animation and filmmaking to this date. Now, perhaps I'm being a little bit harsh with the show, utilizing very heavy language to describe my honest feelings about it, but allow me to explain. In the 3 times I've watched the first season of the show in its entirety, I've come to terms with a lot of what the show does wrong, from many different standpoints. But that's not to say that I don't understand the wide, almost mainstream appeal to the show, nor why people enjoy the show as much as they do. I'm not saying that you're not allowed to enjoy something, and it's important that you're passionate about things that you do like, but in my opinion, I do honestly think that the show itself is much worse than a lot of people may initially perceive through the near-infinite praise that Attack on Titan receives unanimously across the internet. So, without further ado, allow me to share with you my thoughts on why Attack on Titan is one of the worst shows I've ever seen. I went into Attack on Titan with a clear mind, and nothing more than high hopes for a show that had people as riled up as this, and I wanted to like it, but I ended up being sorely disappointed by it, almost from the get-go. However, there are some praises to be had. Episode 1 is actually a good introduction to the show, and the pacing in this particular episode is done quite eloquently, with fantastic attention to detail introducing the world and characters, creating a picturesque, tranquil, and idyllic environment for our characters to be a part of, and find ourselves, as the viewer, quite fond of, and quite immersed within. Before all of that is shattered upon the arrival of the overarching threat of the Titans, and understanding that not only are humans entirely powerless within this world, but that we are no longer the dominant species on the planet. The Titans themselves are quite well done in their presentation, with malformed, terrifying expressions of emotionless torment as they pursue their goal which we're never really made fully aware of. The existential horror that breaks the world in twain is bloody, gory, and downright petrifying, making its mark as something that delivers and presents itself as almost too good, even going as far as implementing subtle nuances in the color palette of the show, with the bright blues and greens of the peaceful, splendid day evoking emotions of joy and happiness, to the evening amber when the Titans attack, switching to a more washed out color scheme of sunset orange, signaling the end of all things, such as the sun setting, which signals the end of the day. If the show remained in such high standards like these, there wouldn't be a problem, right? But you know what they say, don't blow your load. I mean, don't blow your royal flush straight away, or whatever the idiom was again. Did he say royal? Like, royale? Victory Royale! Oh my god! Unfortunately, that's about where all of my praise ends for the show, as it just descends from this point and quickly becomes a terrible mishmash of random aspects, which leaves the impression that the writer had no idea what he's actually doing. One of the biggest sins of Attack on Titan is that the pacing of the show is a complete mess, taking the show from 0 to 100 and back again in an instant, and either presenting scenarios too soon or too late after building up towards them. There's never an indication what direction the show wishes to go in, forgetting key principles in filmmaking which would keep a viewer immersed within the world you've created. The best example toward this is the implication and seemingly audacious passage of time in the show's first few episodes, covering a span of 5 years in the show's world over the course of 3 to 4 episodes, in which we, as the viewer, are provided with very little information regarding. Heck, if the characters didn't blurt out,
"Oh hey, hasn't it been 5 years since the last Titan attack?"
Why yes, faceless person with no actual name, it has been 5 years. Boy, those 5 years sure flew by.
Haha, yes. What a peaceful 5 years it's been.
Yo, what is up, guys? James for the win, back with another banger.
It's been 5 years since then, and I'm still the same whiny bitch as 5 years ago. It's been 5 years already, huh? 5 years died mom ago. I sure do miss her.
Then we'd have almost no idea that time has even passed, aside from the characters looking visually older, or what has happened in between those parts for our characters to get to the point that they're currently at, with the challenges that await them. Incidents and scenes that center themselves around action tend to pay very little attention to detail when it comes to the overall pacing, resulting in abrupt combat that simply gets thrown into the mix because it's the episode's daily quota for a fight scene, or the world itself standing still so the main cast can do their usual monologue in dire straits, in which they get to appear more heroic. The greatest example I can provide is during episode 10, where our main cast is being held at gun and cannon point by the military police, and after firing a cannon at the squad, a large cloud of smoke is kicked up, leaving our characters to collect their thoughts before acting. I couldn't help but think that this particular instance was taking quite some time, and I decided to check how long we were within the smoke, listening to their life or death conversation, going over 8 minutes in duration. Just take that into account for a second. 8 minutes of characters sitting around, stating completely redundant things that the viewer is already thinking. There are several scenes when the Titans just seemingly disappear from any visual spectrum, leaving the characters in this empty void whilst they talk about all their friends dying, or what they had for breakfast the other day. The absence of the threat gives off an uncertainty to the size and scope of the fictional world that we're dealing with, where its size and shape seem to change depending on what the plot needs to be more convenient at the time, breaking any realistic sense of immersion and placement within the world alongside the characters we're meant to be getting along with. On the subject of characters, there's just far too much to say about them, but we can at least start off with the main cast of Eren Yeager, Armin Ardlet, and Mikasa Ackerman, a trio of troublesome troglodytes who are in a race to see who can be the least likable in the entire franchise. They're bland and completely one-dimensional in almost every aspect, fitting into tropes and stereotypical character traits whenever they end up actually stating their prowess within the plot, with only Mikasa showing the slightest bit of innovative character every now and again, until going right back to being the standard overly strong pseudo-mother type character with zero actual personality. Aruman is a completely flat character that fulfills the role of the physically weaker and socially inept character, incapable of combat, but has the brains to come up with ingenious strategies and has a heart of gold for his friends, with his character going no further than simply that, and jumping through the exact same hoops in his development as any other character from any other show that falls under the same set of criteria. Finally, Eren is just a complete nonce. I don't know how to explain his personality other than being completely unlikable, being needlessly cold towards his adopted sister and best friend, and flagging off his comrades' deaths as if they meant nothing, but we'll get onto that shortly. Eren is also the type of character who joins the generic lineup of overpowered main characters that easygoing anime fans perceive as awesome, next to the likes of Kirito from Sword Art Online, Sora from No Game No Life, and Naruto from, well, Naruto, the types of characters that remove a lot of stakes from conflicts simply by existing. Their sheer presence within the plot is enough for any antagonizing force to bend over backwards and spread those legs for the massive amount of plot convenience that they carry with them in the story, having any and every situation go entirely in their favor without even as much as the slightest bit of coherent thought or convention put into it, right before they can turn around and say some cheesy one-liner like, all according to plan, I mean Keikaku. Sure, Eren is momentarily killed off as he's devoured by a titan in an act to save Armin from succumbing to an early demise, but then he just so happens to be the show's chosen one, almost immediately reversing the situation and breaking the future constructive narrative of the show into pieces. Eren's ability to transform into a titan removes a lot of the stakes from the show's drive to watch humanity fight for survival into nothing more than a simple power fantasy, putting almost every other character in the show, side character or not, onto the back burner, whilst we watch a bunch of oversized naked men have a fist fight in the middle of the city, as it practically makes Eren near invincible, with very few drawbacks, most of which can be avoided as shown at multiple points in the show. Why send in the troops at all when you can just send in Eren to punch the life out of everything? As for any other character featured in the plot, you may as well just remove their names entirely and call them Meat Puppet number 246, or whatever whatever number you want to put alongside it, as that essentially becomes the only eventual purpose for even having background characters to begin with. To show you a fine example of exactly what I mean by this, allow me to outline the worst episode in the entire series, episode 13. Episode 13 draws the conclusion of the 8-episode battle against the Titans to take back the City of Trust, with a plan that was devised by the commander of the armed forces and utilizing the newly acquainted and accepted powers of Eren's transformation. You would think with how long we've been at the heart of battle for now, that this episode would be an episode to commemorate, an exciting thrill ride that stays in our hearts as something to remember. Right? Right? No. Not at all. This one particular episode does a lot of things wrong, in both narrative and story aspects, and even as far as the physical and technical aspects. To mention this once again, the unbelievably mishandled pacing rears its ugly face again, as the previous episode's recap takes over 3 minutes to finish, and new footage doesn't begin playing out until 5 minutes and 19 seconds into the episode, which is over a quarter of the way through the runtime. Heck, the plan to move the boulder to block the hole in the wall was devised at the end of episode 10, yet it takes us until halfway through episode 13 for this plan to be fully accomplished, despite the simplistic nature of the idea. The plan itself is completely nonsensical, as they want the soldiers to simply distract the Titans so Eren can move the boulder, and then eliminate them once the boulder has been properly placed. But don't you have to kill the Titans anyway at the end of the plan? What's stopping you from doing it beforehand? There are people dying for no reason, but who cares about those guys? Look how cool our main cast is. Who cares if a couple of hundred people died off screen for plot points that make no sense? Psh. Can someone tell me why these dudes are running on the ground? People even point out how suicidal that is. Wait, it's to distract the Titans away from Eren. What's stopping them from doing that in the air, where it's safe? There's no reason for them not to do that. And yet, there they are, getting themselves killed almost on purpose so that Eren can look like a glorified hero after all of this. Aren't these meant to be high-ranking elite officers? Why are they using such abhorrently stupid tactics that 100% result in their death without a seemingly good explanation? Their only purpose is to serve as a stepping stone for other characters' success, which is just ridiculous. Oh look, Marco's got a bunch of character development. Oh look, Marco's dead. Oh no, he was such a good character, and things were looking up for him, even helping the incredible Sulk over here become a character with a couple of more emotions than sulking. Are you not shocked at his death? Oh no. Death is made an almost trivial subject at this point, being milked for all of its shock value and meaning absolutely nothing when characters we haven't even gotten to know yet are just thrown to the slaughter faster than you can blink. Do you remember when Eren's mother was killed in the first episode and how much of a shock reveal that was? Well, death means nothing anymore, so sorry, but look at how cool Eren is carrying that goddamn boulder! As I mentioned, not even the technical aspects of the show are safe from being tarnished. For example, what is that frame rate? No, you're not seeing things. That is the actual frame rate from the show. I have not edited this at all. There's also one particular shot amongst all the action that makes no sense in any form of cinematography and lingers for far longer than it should. The shot composition goes like this. Sulky Pants is running towards a Titan, fires his grapple. We then see a shot where the Titan snags the line. Then we're given an overhead sweeping view of the city with literally no characters on screen, nor any Titans, that lingers for far longer than what I'm comfortable with, before cutting back to Sulkmaster on the ground, attempting to get back up, with no indication how he even got there. I shouldn't need to explain to you why that makes no sense at all. It breaks basic filmmaking and editing rules, so there's not much else that needs to be said. Hello, it's me again, from the future. So, whilst going over the footage, I found some incredibly odd things to do with the points I just made about the low frame rates and the misplaced shot that lingered, the shot that was basically incorrect. Now, one of the most interesting things about this is the footage that I acquired. Some of it is in English and some of it's in Japanese, and some of the English footage actually fixes the problems that I mentioned. For example, on your screen right now, you probably see the clip I was talking about with the low frame rate. Interestingly enough, what's actually happened there is, for some bizarre reason, the Japanese footage has the shot of the troops landing on the roof that's been taken out, and it's been replaced with a shot, well, just the shot of the Titans coming through the hole in the wall. For some bizarre reason, that footage is slowed down, and It's stretched over what is essentially missing footage. And as for the second one with the lingering shot, the same kind of thing applies there. It's a shot that's been replaced, again in the Japanese version, but in the English version, for some unknown reason, that's been fixed. I can't quite put my finger on as to why that is, but again, just as you can see from the examples on screen, I'll probably just keep cycling the footage over and over again, but this is just really weird. The Japanese footage, especially because of the fact that it has those errors in them, those oddities, what baffles me the most is the fact that those were broadcast. That footage was actually broadcast, and, well, I mean, you know, was it checked beforehand? I don't know, there's probably some explanation for it somewhere, buried somewhere on the internet, but in all honesty, it's like several seconds of footage, which I personally can't be bothered going through, but at least, you know, it makes my point slightly less valid, but again, due to the fact that these were broadcast, this is official footage. Even though my point is less valid than it was before, it's still valid. So, don't try to counter-argue me. Anyway, back to my really annoying reading voice. Have fun, subscribe for more mangas. This occurs in almost every other episode as well, but the multiple aspects that are overlooked show up more often in this episode than anywhere else. From the usage of meaningless character deaths for the sake of cheap emotional jabs at the viewer, to the show generally being unprofessional in its borderline idiotic plot and jarring presentation. Hell, look at this transition from episode 3, or these examples of characters having rather large outlines compared to normal, making them look like they're sitting on top of the frame, rather than actually being in the image. You think I didn't notice that pesky colossal titan and his constantly shifting bodily proportions? Guess again. So much for your immersion, eh?
On your hands.
Just this once.
I'm sorry, which characters just saluted? The townsfolk? I mean, they wouldn't know how to salute, nor would they address those officers in that way. It was off-screen and primarily male, but no one else in this frame had a reason to respond like that. Like... Attack on Titan also treats its viewers like complete morons as well, as it feels the need to recap the entire story from the beginning of every single episode, taking up large quantities of runtime and fluffing out the general duration of the show, making it seem much longer and much more generous than it actually is. I've seen much more in-depth shows of convoluted plots full of intricate contrivances far beyond the scope of Attack on Titan's narrative in the past, and yet they've never felt the need to recap the entire plot every couple of steps. In fact, the 5-year gap between the Titans' attacks isn't even explained all too well, and when you really analyze the kind of world that's being constructed before us, the Titans taking a break for 5 years and giving the main cast time to get good, like it's the Cell games or something, makes very little sense in the grand scheme of things. Another episode that comes to mind is the episode featuring a flashback to Mikasa's past, and how she, a character who was distinctly made to look different from other characters due to her race, ended up in a family with a different surname to her. Although, you do honestly have a hard time noticing until someone blatantly points out that she's Asian. Although, there isn't honestly much wrong with the flashback in itself, and it plays out like quite a standard affair of gaining brownie points for her character, making the viewer feel much more sorry for her. The main issue is that I honestly just don't care enough for the character at this point to elicit having a hefty and violent flashback thrown onto my lap to garner a response from me. This heart-wrenching sequence of events is used to elevate Mikasa and Eren to the point where we are rooting for them all the way. We've seen them grow up, and now we know how rough they had it when they were younger, and seeing them fight for their freedom is exactly where we want them to succeed. But again, I care very little for them at this point. This again comes down to the terrible pacing and oblique delivery of such an event, timing it completely wrong, and looking like nothing more than a cheap shot at creating an emotional atmosphere, because please like our characters, they're so cool and they were also cute kids that went through a lot. Characters have motivations when it suits the plot, and lose and gain control of circumstances in the same vein, such as Eren with his powers, creating a false sense of tensity. Thus, it never really feels like our characters know what they're doing, or what the end goal is, so we end up with multiple loose ends that never get tied up, making waves for genuinely crippling plot holes along the way, damaging any semblance of intellectual integrity that may be present. What bothers me most about the show is that we're seeing some incredibly creative ideas being pitched to craft a the unique experience to qualify itself as something great, and yet we're not really seeing anything innovative or new with the hand it deals, becoming something filled to the brim with generic tropes and cookie-cutter ideologies, achieving next to nothing throughout the screen time and being an overall disappointment. The thing is, with all the grand statements I'd heard about this show, although I approached it with the most unbiased mentality I possibly could, I went into the show wanting to like it, and was left sorely let down in almost all regards, even after the incredibly promising and fast-paced opening that the show initially offered. It's as if the opening episode happened, and a large portion of the audience was left hanging on in anticipation for the next episode just like it, which never ended up coming along.
Oh my god, is that Jotaro?
To wrap up my point, I may as well conclude by talking about the ending, and all the turns in the plot that go along with it, as the apparent twists the plot offers can be seen coming from a literal mile away, unless you're potentially lacking in the brain department, like the show tends to think of you. After quite some time going through the same scenarios with slightly different coats of paint on them, you'd be happy to hear that almost nothing changes in how the majority of conflicts are played out. More characters who have an unusual amount of screen time for simple side characters are sacrificed and killed off for no reason at all, other than cheap shock value, and to make Eren look like even more of a hero than before by standing there and doing absolutely nothing with a dreaded expression on his face. At this point, it just becomes nothing more than a simple formula. Build some characters up, get them to talk to one of the main cast, have them die because of their alleged emotional attachment, rinse, lava, repeat, bake at 240 degrees for 25 minutes. It never deviates from this, yet expects the same reaction from people every single time it happens. Why not have Eren transform into a Titan just to take on the female Titan with the aid of his comrades, who he's meant to believe in, and even has an internal monologue over?
No, Eren, you can't. You mustn't.
But why?
Oh, you silly bean. We need to be killed off for literally no fucking reason so you can look like the hero who saves the day. And we get a shot of Levi mourning our death so viewers know that he has more than one emotion aside from Edgelord McGee. And he secretly cares for us, but our viewers are too retarded to realize that.
But that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I can literally transform right now and avoid any further needless casualty.
Oh, just shut the fuck up and watch us die from a distance already.
Oh, hey look, it's the female Titan that almost perfectly resembles Annie right down to the facial structure,
Hairstyle, combat and martial capabilities, as well as Annie just suddenly going missing from the plot whenever this Titan shows up, as well as giving us a lot of screen time to Annie all of a sudden. But we promise you that it isn't Annie. You'll just have to wait and see who it is, because it'll remain a complete surprise! It's Annie! Ha! Gotcha! What a reveal. You should have seen the look on your face the whole time. Bet you didn't see that one coming up. It gets to the point where Eren even questions the plot himself, excusing it for him not having the strength to go ahead with this decision, yet fully realizing and portraying not only the stupidity of the fact that people died for no reason whatsoever, but the last several episodes could have been avoided entirely if he had just turned into a Titan and fought the opposing threat. In summary, he's basically saying you've been wasting your time watching this, and nothing has progressed within the last several hours of footage. The ending drags itself along as well, with some episodes advancing almost nowhere, such as episode 22, where the only significant thing to happen is Mikasa and Levi retrieving Eren's body, which is done in the first 5 minutes of the episode, and then, well, nothing else really happens for the next 15 minutes. Sure, there's that part with the bodies, but there's not really much weight to it, and it seems attached on for the sake of further cheap shock value, taking into account human morals with zero significance on narrative structure. Eren remains completely brainless to the very end, even after witnessing the transformation of the female Titan. He's still stubborn in his endeavors to be like,
I literally just saw her transform and mercilessly kill civilians and my fellow comrades, but there's no way.
Here's a random shot of a cat. The conclusion to the show can be summed up like this. More of the same. A bunch of dudes are killed, the stakes are raised, and Eren gets to look like a hero. Again, this perfectly outlines why I honestly despise Eren Yeager as a character, as the entire plot, as simplistic as it is, and every single other character introduced in the entire show, is nothing more than a stepping stone to some grandiose pedestal to place Eren as the ultimate badass, where everything just goes right for him. Yeah, we lost some genuinely likable and interesting characters, and we could have tried harder to develop some of the side characters, but Eren f***ing Yeager, am I right? Please think he's cool. OC, by the way, please do not steal. Main characters are important, and there are some shows out there with completely overpowered or overly fortunate plot convenience-fueled characters. But Eren takes the cake and runs about 47 miles with the damn thing. Eren has almost no development, most of which is squandered alongside other characters with much more appealing traits. And yet we're expected to put all of our eggs in one basket and root for him because without him, the plot would fall to pieces. And so it's almost as if we're forced to get along with him due to his powers in the plot. He's unlikable with no redeeming traits. And yet to even draw a satisfying conclusion to this overly fluffed up and terribly uneventful show, we're made to sit alongside the world's most generic anime protagonist that does everything correct, even if it isn't, because we said so. So sit down and watch our show, you peon. Thanks for killing all those innocent people, by the way, Eren, but at least we got a cool slow-mo shot of you punching a woman in the face. All in all, I really dislike this show, for various reasons I just spoke about, but allow me to clarify something. Just because I dislike something doesn't mean that you have to agree with me. This is, after all, my opinion, and just as much as I'm entitled to my opinion, you too are entitled to yours. Which means I'd love to hear what you thought as well, if you agreed, or even if you disagreed with the points that I've made. I do like the fact that the show is able to appeal to a much more mainstream demographic, allowing people outside of the medium to take anime more seriously. And I also love the culture which shows like this inspire. I'm not simply going against the norm of hating this show because I'm the type of person who's like, I only watch niche things, by the way, look at my vinyl collection. But instead, I simply have a differing opinion where the show just didn't appeal to my interests. Unlike the vast majority who came away from this enjoying it to its fullest. Although I'll never understand the types of people who think Attack on Titan is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I will say that if you like the show, then more power to you, and I respect that. Equally, however, I would ask for you to also humbly respect what I have said, and why I think the show just isn't as great as the general consensus proclaims it to be. This has been a very long review, and I'm gonna go watch more shows about being a psychotic murderer whilst also caring for a young lolly girl, who most people disturbingly want to bone, even though she's supposed to be 8 years old or something. If you enjoy this and would like to see more just like this, remember to like, subscribe, click the bell, and tell me down below about, well, anything. And I'll see you in the next one.
It's me, generic e-girl.